what is superpower? What is a superpower? Well, when I work with people doing what I call a whiteboard session, where basically I extract everything great, everything that's a hardship, everything that's a hurdle, everything that's stuff that you don't like, and I help you form a plan. This is a whiteboard session I do with my one-on-one clients. One thing we also identify is our superpowers. And one common trend that I see people just completely steer away from is the power of vulnerability. The internet has lied to you about opening up. Your parents have probably lied to you about opening up and being honest and conversing about what's actually going on in your life and how you're feeling it and things that you're experiencing. You know, one big disservice that I had in the military was that mindset, like, suck it up. Now, granted, there's a time and place to suck it up, right? There's a time and place to suck it up for everything. But there's also time and place to take care of yourself. In the middle of the fight, yep, suck it up. When I got shot in the helmet, as you see the helmet over here, when I got shot in the helmet when I was 18 years old, yeah, I was told, suck it up, pick up your rifle, as I'm convulsing and throwing up everywhere. But hey, when I got off the battlefield, guess what I did? I sought medical attention. I got taken care of. Now, in my story throughout the military career, I constantly sucked it up. That's what I did. I was a war fighter. I was bred for it. I was born to be a war fighter. I was born to be a leader. Do you think I thought about superpowers? No, I was just superhuman. I was so superhuman, I was delusional with actually what was going on. I always cared about everyone else, and I always put myself in the back burner. Well, after 15 years of service, it all caught up to me. So I find myself on my last deployment to Iraq in 2015. At this time in my career, I've been in about 12 years. I'm also a Master Sergeant. I'm the youngest Marine Master Sergeant in the Marine Corps history. So in MARSOC, that made me, at this particular time, I was a company operations chief. So when I deployed, I was actually in charge of 3 SEAL platoons. I was in charge of 2 Raider teams in Iraq, and I was in charge of 2 Raider teams in other countries. And I'm managing all these warfighters in the battlefield, staring at a big screen TV in an agency building, losing my mind. I wasn't losing my mind because I was too good to support these men and women by sitting in an operations center. I was losing my mind because I was suffering so much. I was constantly tired. I was constantly taking ranger naps. If you don't know what a ranger nap is like, yo, you got 3 minutes before we push out? Good. I'm going to shut my eyes for 3 minutes. It all adds up. And I was constantly taking this. I was constantly like just pumping stimulants in my body, like, you know, insert, you name it. I was doing it. Coffee, tea, you know, energy drinks. I was nonstop using tobacco, just trying to stay focused, trying to stay alert so I could do my job. You know, at that time in my life, that was like 18-hour days. I'm in a building just staring at a wall of TVs and very limited sunlight, very limited exposure. I definitely got fitness in every day, but it was still hard. Definitely not as hard as the guys and the girls on the ground, but it was hard for me with what I was dealing with. This deployment was so stressful. I mean, guys, I love the military. I don't love how the military's ran. I don't love the leadership in some of these military units. And what I realized, being at such a senior rank, being such a young guy, peeking behind the curtains, I realized it's a hot mess. It is a hot mess. That just adds a whole nother layer of stress onto it all. It just adds another layer of just bureaucratic bullshit. But that's the price you pay, right? And take whatever idea or concept you have about the military and just shove it the window. 1, I don't really care. 2, I'm fully aware of how the military is utilized. But one thing I really cared much more than anything, I cared about the men and women that I served with. I cared about these men and women that would kill to be acknowledged, that would do literally anything for a little bit of like, hey, man, you're doing great. And what I realized, that just didn't happen. So as a leader, I always made sure I would give attaboys and attagirls when they were due. I would never fluff you. You couldn't pay me all the money in the world to fluff you or to lie to you, to say that you're doing a great job when you suck. I was a leader. I treated Marines and everyone else I worked with firmness, fairness, and compassion. How did I treat myself? With a suck it up mentality. So I come back from this deployment, and at the time in MARSOC, you do this thing called HLD, home location decompression. So essentially all that was is like you talk to like all your administrative shops, make sure your pay is good, you talk to a physical therapist, you talk to the chaplain, and then at the very end you talk to a psychologist. And when I'm talking to this guy, he's like, so tell me about your problems. I'm like, fuck you, dude. Listen. He's like, excuse me? I'm like, listen, I've told my story to you guys numerous times. P.S. I had a lot of bad run-ins. Because in that job, there's this big stigma about like addressing issues. You know, guys in my profession, the special operations world, and just in the Marine Corps and the military in general, you're worried about losing your security clearance. You're worried about losing your gun. You're worried about losing your position on the team. You're worried about losing an opportunity on your deployment. And most guys just don't open up. And so there's that big stigma about it. And so I tell this doc, I'm like, hey, bro, check it out. You get me Adderall. You get my sleep fixed. I'll tell you whatever you want to know. I'll tell you everything about this deployment. I'll tell you everything that's going on in my life. And I mentioned Adderall because I was constantly losing focus. I was constantly like just being distracted like a butterfly. If it wasn't like a high state, 100-mile-an-hour stress, I could not handle it. On top of that, my sleep was absolute crap. I could sleep 13 hours, 14 hours, and I was still extremely exhausted. And I didn't know anything at the time. I just knew how I was feeling, and I started to articulate it. But at this point in my career, I was so fed up. I was so fed up with so much bureaucratic crap. I was so fed up with like poor leadership and how they just would literally push guys to the side to make sure they're the stars of the show. And I was disgusted. And I had this really nasty taste in my mouth. And so at this part of my career, I come back and do this home location decompression, and my next position, my next duty station was to take over one of the sections at the schoolhouse, our Marine Raider Training Center. And so I'm there, and I sign up for this. I'm like, hey, I'm here for the next 3 years. I'm going to go to the brain clinic finally. It's called Intrepid Spirit in the Marine Corps. And so I get my commander to sign off on it. I go to the brain clinic, and they're like, bro, all your results came back. You're pretty jacked up. And I'm like, what? Like I wasn't shocked. I've been shotgunning, wellness checks. Like, how are you feeling? Oh, I'm feeling great. How much alcohol do you drink? I drink none. Because in the military, you do these things called like pre-deployment health assessments and then post-deployment health assessments. And dude, if you drink like more than like 3 beers a week, you're an alcoholic. If you don't eat 2 cans of green beans a day, you're obese, you're unhealthy, like all these things. And don't quote me on all those, but it was insane. And if you marked high on these, you had to talk to a doctor. It was just, nobody wanted to do that stuff. It's just more crap, right? So what do we do best? We just shotgun it. We just BS it all. So, because dudes want to stay in the fight, because that's what war fighters do. We stay in the fight. And believe it or not, dudes, I stayed in the military as long as I did because I loved serving the men and women that I worked with. Just, it is a freaking honor, especially being that leadership, this key leadership position, and to be able to take all the good and bad that I learned throughout my career, through my mentors, through my leaders, and be able to produce a result that I deemed worthy of the people that I was in charge of, right? You guys are in some of those leadership positions. You're like, man, one day when I'm in charge, I'm going to do it completely different. Then they get in charge. They don't do anything completely different. They actually do it completely the same, if not worse, right? They think they drink the Kool-Aid, we call it in the military. Oh, but they drink the Kool-Aid. And then they just like go off the deep end. They forget what it's like to be the dude on the ground, and they go retarded, right? And so that wasn't me. But at this time in my life, I'm like, dude, I am desperate. My marriage is falling apart. My wife actually told me, she's like, the guy that I married, that's not the guy that returned home from this deployment. And that hurt me a lot. It hurt me a lot to know that my life has changed that much and that I've put this much burden on my wife for her to say something like that. So I started going to all these appointments, and I'm starting to get educated on like why I'm acting in a certain way. My brain's shutting down. I'm having uncontrollable adrenaline surges. I am to the point where the neurosurgeon comes in. He's like, hey, what if I told you you couldn't be a Marine anymore? I'm like, fuck you. Because he took me by surprise. He's like, well, what if I told you you couldn't be a Marine? He's like, there's enough to get you on a medical board and get you out of the Marine Corps. He's like, I think you should actually look into it. So I started looking at these test results. I started looking at all these things. I'm like, dude, I'm pretty jacked up. And then I just looked around and all these other guys are just jacked up. And I asked myself, why aren't they here? Why aren't they taking care of themselves? Well, in the military, especially the special operations community, nobody wants to be a quote-unquote sick bay commando. Sick bay is like, you know, every morning there's like a sick bay hours where if you have any ailments or issues, you can go talk to the doc, and it's like, you know, a couple hours every morning. And nobody wants to be the guy or the girl that's always there getting their stuff worked on. Nobody wants to be that person. And I'm like, okay, I'll start getting myself checked out. Sure, let's do this. And I started to pull the thread on my health, my mental health, my wellness, and started going to all these appointments. And it got to the point where as I started to expose myself and open up to like the things that I was dealing with, more and more issues came into my life. But the thing was, I was just uncovering them. They were already in my life. I just was blind to them because I put them off to the side. I compartmentalized them because I'm like, you know, you're not important to address right now. The mission's more important. The men is more important. I'm not important. Well, there's a price you pay for that. There's a price you pay for being stubborn and, you know, ignorant. Ignorance is not knowing. Arrogance knowing and not doing anything about it. Well, now that I knew, I had an opportunity to be arrogant. But I'm like, you know what? I'm done lying, dude. I'm going to get myself taken care of. Like, I wanted to be, you know, I had enough time on my contract, you know, to do 30 years in the Marine Corps. Dude, I had like 16 years left in the military at this time. Like, if I wanted to stay until like 30 years, and dude, I'd be in charge of like everything. It'd be super sick. I had so much time on my contract because I was so junior and yet so senior. So I had so much room. And all I wanted to do was just be healthy and function properly. Well, I quickly realized that that wasn't a reality that I was going to be able to do. I quickly realized that my whole life as I knew it was about to change drastically. So it got to the point where I needed no stress in my life. It even got to the point where I canceled my free fall pay. You get paid extra to be a free faller, a diver, a breacher, all these, and even part of special operations, you get paid extra stipend pay, special duty assignment pay. And I canceled and postponed and stopped my free fall pay because I was just walking around minding my own business, and I just, out of nowhere, I just have an uncontrollable adrenaline surge. I have this crazy high. I get like super aggressive and like just super like amped in the red, and then I would just crash, and I'd be like so lethargic I had to take a nap. And what I didn't want to do was have that happen, because it's not like I knew when it's going to happen. I didn't want that to happen on like on the ramp, getting ready to jump out of an aircraft, and then now I'm like super lethargic and I'm falling from the sky, and now I become a jeopardy to my team as well as to myself, right? I didn't want to put myself in that situation. I wanted to control as much as I possibly could and be smart about it. I'm desperate, guys. I was so desperate at this time in my life. So I went up to my boss one day, and I'm like, hey, man, like, I need no responsibility. Now, granted, my job was so easy. There was 2 positions, and I filled one of them, and I was in charge of like 2 sections inside the schoolhouse. And the other guy was in charge of the other 2 sections. And we all both had advanced courses that we were in charge of. So like there was a lot of responsibility, but I had like key leaders for each one of those sections. So like my job was fairly easy. I just had to go to like meetings that were pointless and, you know, stick up for the guys and fight for what they need. And like, you know, do administrative stuff. Like I'm writing awards now. Like my life is cush. It was still too much for me. So I go to my boss. I'm like, hey, dude, I'm going through a lot of this stuff. Like I need no stress. Like my hair's falling out. I was grinding my teeth so much from the stress, I cracked my tooth. My butt cheeks were constantly clenched. The inflammation in my body was literally taking over my life. And my household, dude, I was destroying my marriage. I hated me. I hated everyone around me. Because what was happening, what I was going through, I didn't know how to put a word on it. I didn't know how to verbalize it. And I didn't even know what was happening. It was terrifying. And so my boss, he's like, long story short, he's like, hey, we'll get you taken care of. So they ended up moving me to our human performance side, our humans performance program side. And that had all the doctors and all like the neurosurgeons, and it had like all the cool whiz bang stuff, like cool like equipment and like monitors to like track your like breathing and your neurofeedback, all these things that no team guy knew existed. No one knew it existed. Now it's not like MARSOC didn't like put out that information, but it's just like none of these team guys are back to go to these PowerPoints. And another thing about this is like, why do I listen to another doctor or another like senior guy who's never been in my shoes? No wonder dudes aren't going to these things. We're not even using the equipment. But I was, because now I'm in that section. And as I'm doing these things, heart rate variability, I'm doing breath work, I'm doing neurofeedback, I'm doing all these crazy things, and I'm seeing drastic changes in my life. Drastic changes. And I'm still going downhill, but I'm seeing so many changes from going downhill. So I became a spokesman for this. I started to open up to like the guys in our organization, like, hey, did you know we have this thing? They're like, well, what are you talking about? Like, bro, this thing has done this for me. And I realized that these guys are stubborn just like me. They just haven't hit this like rock bottom in their career like I have. Or they may not have accepted it. Maybe I'm a wuss. I don't know. I mean, I don't really care what anyone thinks about me. I am just blessed. I'm so grateful that I was guided and had the strength to stand up for myself. Because for so many years, I constantly did not take care of myself. And that's truly jeopardizing the team. And I never looked at it that way. I was a walking liability, but I was functioning. I was a functioning liability. In the grand scheme of things, I had to take a lot of self-reflection. I had to do a lot of self-work to come to even that conclusion. Well, now I'm briefing our command. I'm going to like events, and I'm like talking about like these things that we have and these things that I'm doing and how it's changing my life. And like I'm on these different programs. I went to the brain clinic. I'm getting my hormones checked. I'm getting my blood checked. I'm dealing with like just random stress, all these things. And people look at me like, bro, what are you doing? I'm like, dude, I'm just telling you what's going on. I'm telling you how it is. I would be at meetings talking about like how I was suffering and going through like all this anxiety, all this crazy depression, and the things that I was doing to work on it. And I'd ask if there's any questions, and people wouldn't raise their hands. Why would they? They're in a dog park full of alphas. Why do they want to stand out and be perceived as like a chihuahua, something small, something inferior? But what was crazy, when I realized that these guys would come up to me afterwards, they'd be like, hey, dude, how did you get your hormones tested? How did you get on testosterone? How did you get Adderall? How did you get your sleep fixed? What are you doing with that depression? How did you deal with that anxiety? How are you coping with this? How are you dealing with this? I'm like, man, what's the deal here? Why are these men, who are some of the bravest men I know in my life, why are they so scared to ask questions? Why are they so scared to stand up for themselves? Why are they so scared to be seen? And that's when it hit me. My ability to be vulnerable and to showcase that, it opened up so many more opportunities for these guys, because these guys felt alone. They were lost, they were scared, and they were unseen because they just masked all their issues. And here I am, very blessed with my military career, the fastest promoted master sergeant in the Marine Corps. I have all these like crazy gnarly combat deployments, these crazy gnarly like experiences, right? And I was well known in my unit. I was well known in the Marine Corps. People knew who I was, and I don't take that lightly. I'm humbled by that. But you know how they know me most of? Because I'm open and I'm real. I'm a real dude. I have real problems. Not only do I just voice these problems, I'm actually doing something about it. So the greatest thing about my downfall in the military, and it wasn't really a downfall, however, I was borderline destroying an entire 15-year career because how this was affecting my body. Guys, I would walk down the hallway just crying, bawling for no reason. Like, I didn't know why. And I'm like, why am I crying? What's going on? Someone would I feel like do me dirty, and I would want to murder them, just straight up lose my mind and want to physically harm them. And I didn't care. I didn't care who heard me, who saw me. Professionalism, out the window. Guys, I was self-destructing. I was a ticking time bomb. But the sickest thing was through that darkness, I was able to shed so much light on issues and help guys get the help they needed. Because I opened my mouth. They're like, bro, how did you do this? I'm like, this is how I did it. They're like, man, what about your clearance? I don't want to get this addressed for my Adderall or my sleeping issues or my depression or my anxiety that I have right now because I don't want to lose my clearance. I'm like, bro, I'm on a medical board, meaning I'm being essentially processed out of the military, and they renewed my clearance while I was on the medical board. I'm like, guys, you're good. It's all scare tactics that not your command tells you, it's the uninformed individuals tell you, right? There's all these like C stories of like, oh, don't do that. They're gonna take your gun from you. I mean, bro, like if you're suicidal, you're harming yourself and others. Yeah, let's use some common sense here. But if you got some depression, you got some anxiety, you got erectile dysfunction, you have low energy, low libido, bad focus, poor sleep. How is that your fault, bro? They sent you to war. They sent you to go do crazy, insane, unimaginable things. How is that weird? What would you expect to happen after being exposed to all those things? That you're just fine? You know, this time in MARSOC, we had so many casualties, not just in combat, but on stateside training, helicopters going down, airplanes going down, and teams just getting wiped out. It was a very tough emotional time in my life, and I was very verbal about what I was experiencing because, guys, unlike a lot of you, I wanted to be better. Not just at my job, but I wanted to be better for myself because if I'm not my best, I can't perform my job my best. And as a leader, people are counting on me. As a leader, people are also counting on me to step up. Guys, so many of you are in those same scenarios in your life where people are just praying that someone is brave enough to raise a hand, open their mouth, to address something, to bring light to something. There's so many things that you have gone through in your life. Traumatic, dude. God, so traumatic. And you've just compartmentalized because you're scared. Or it's so bad with trauma and such a bad memory. Either one, you can't access it because your frontal cortex is blocking it from you, right? It's kind of your brain's trying to keep you safe. Or you're embarrassed. You don't want to know that you're molested, raped, abused. And you carry that weight around 24/7. And then you get exposed to whatever life brings you. You don't have to be in the military to have traumatic, post-traumatic stress. I mean, you could be part of life and have those things. But let me ask you this. When you talk about, let's say you never have, but let's say you maybe talk to yourself or a really close family member or a friend about what you're going through, how do you feel after you talk about it? You probably feel this like big weight off your shoulders. What happens when you lead with something like, hey guys, I'm going through something right now, and this is what I'm doing? Have you never said something like that and had people come up to you and be like, hey bro, thank you for saying that. I've been going through the same thing. I thought I was alone. Guys, your ability to empower yourself to tap into your superpowers, and the main one that I truly believe that everyone possesses the ability to tap into, is vulnerability. Guys, it's freeing. It's so freeing. I remember I was one of the first Marines to get on testosterone while active duty through the DOD, through the government. And they're like, bro, how'd you get on testosterone? I'm like, well, one, I addressed the issue with the doctor. I went to the doctor. I'm like, hey, dude, my dick doesn't work. And he's like, okay, well, let's get you tested. So I got my blood work done. He's like, yep, you have extremely low testosterone. I think I had like 70. It was like lower than a female's. Well, let's think about how I can have low testosterone on shitty food, traumatic brain injuries, high states of stress. I mean, guys, people in the military, they're like dog years, right? Like, oh, I see these young Marines are like, I only did 4 years. I'm like, bitch, you did like 12 human years. Like you did more than 99.9% of society. Give yourself some credit, bro, right? Give yourself some credit, right? But everyone's a humbled warrior. Well, how well is being humble working out for you? How many of you right now in your life are just dealing with so much in your life? You have so much stress. You have so much anxiety. You have so much tension. You have so many oohs and owies on your life, but you're not even bringing it up because you're scared about what someone's going to think about you. Why are people just so scared to be vulnerable and to expose themselves? And it doesn't have to be about mental health or wellness. It could be about anything. I remember going to this like Jason Bourne level course that we have access to, and we're getting ready to take a test. Now, granted, this course is nuts, bro. Like day one, when I went there, they checked in. They're like, we're not breaching anything here, right? I'm like, yeah, I'm aware. And so we're doing a bunch of like crazy things with like cameras and microphones, and we're getting ready to take a test about diodes and transistors and resistors and flux capacitors. I'm like, bro, this is like a nerd course. And they're like, hey, before we start the test, does anyone have any questions? Crickets, dude. I'm in a class with like 20 plus dudes. They're all super senior, all from the special operations background, very special operations. And I raise my hand. I ask the question. The instructor tells me exactly what I asked, what I needed to know. And then they're like, all right, take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to take the test. You know what happened? 10 dudes literally came up to me like, hey, what do you say the answer was? Like, what do you tell you it was? I'm like, wait a second. Didn't you have the same opportunity to raise your hand, but you didn't want to because you didn't want to look stupid? How many times, guys, have you like failed a test? Or like, I remember in the Marine Corps when I was a young guy, when I was a young Marine, at first I was kind of like timid. They'd be like, who has a question? So we'd have generals come down and like, they're like, who has a question here? And like, man, you're like, man, I really want to ask a question. But if I raise my hand, they're going to know that I don't know, or they're going to think it's going to spotlight me. But dude, how are you ever supposed to solve anything or bring things to light if you're too scared to raise your hand to another human? These people aren't God, dude. They put on pants just like you. They have diarrhea just like you. They were, breastfed or ate formula just like you. They have pains just like you. They are human. But yet we're so scared to expose ourselves to other humans in fear of being judged. How well is that working out for you? How well is that working out for you? All the people in my coaching group, when I'm helping them build like their social media or their businesses, I'm like, guys, tell a compelling story. Tell a story of how you overcome something. And they're so terrified. And when they do, bro, they get like the most engagement. They get most of their people are like, oh my God, I resonated with this so much. I'm like, well, duh, because you're being real. You're being authentic. You're using your superpower, being vulnerable to open up and to express yourself. I'm living art. And so are you. But a lot of you aren't tapping into it because you're so scared of what someone's going to think about you. Guys, you are going to be so dead one day. So dead. It's comical because I don't think most people really understand that concept. And I'm constantly talking about this in life, in social media, the masterminds I go to. Dude, you're going to die one day. It's going to happen. Maybe by a bear, maybe by a car, maybe old age, maybe World War III. Who knows? What's there to be scared of? You're more worried about what Susie's going to think about you if you raise your hand and ask a question than you are the fact that you're probably not even living up to your full potential. And then when you die, you're going to see who you can become, who you could have become if you just let go of your fears and insecurities. That's hell. If you are courageous enough, and I'm telling you right now, you listening to this, you watching this, however you're consuming this media right now, if you have the courage enough to be vulnerable, you'll transform your life. And on top of that, you're going to help transform so many other lives. But Cody, if I open up, people are going to use that against me. Listen, people that are going to use that stuff against you, they're not your people. So if you're in a job and you bring up something and they're going to use it against you, why would you stay there? For the paycheck? For the paycheck? Why would you stay in that community? Why would you do that? This is how silly we are in our mind. We love to be abused. We love to be in places where we're not appreciated and we're undervalued. Humans, especially Americans, we love this because we have such a cush life. It's not hard. It's actually pretty easy. Being a civilian is easy. Now, there's a lot of things that go along with it, but, bro, you're either going to go do it or you're not. The blueprints are there. The blueprints are there. But people rather not say anything, so they stay in these little groups because they want to be accepted. Bro, are those people going to write your obituary? Are they going to even be at your funeral? Are they going to take care of your family? Probably not. Probably not. Yet you care so much about the perception they have of you. You care so much about that. Guys, when I was walking around owning my stuff, God, I'm just so free. I still do it today because it's a superpower of mine. Vulnerability is a superpower of mine. It just comes to me. Why? Because I lived in hell, and I no longer wish to do that. I lived trapped inside my mind. I lived in a place where I was like, well, what are they going to think about me? Who cares? Who cares? They're not writing my check. Why do I care what they think about me? Why would I go to a school that is extremely hard to pass and then be the guy who doesn't ask a question that might help me pass a test? Why would I do that? Why did we do that to ourselves? We say we want these opportunities. We say we want these crazy things in life, but yet we will hold ourselves back because we're worried about looking dumb. You know who the real dummy is? The idiot that doesn't ask a question. That's the real dummy. So many people, dude, are just big pussies. I don't get it. They're so powerful. They're so powerful and strong, but they think so little of themselves. They allow themselves to play so tiny. They allow themselves to play so tiny. And what's it costing you? What's it costing you? Man, I talk to veterans if I find out you're a veteran, the first thing I ask you, are you getting your VA benefits? Now, to the internet nerds that are veterans online that are like, oh, you start trying to scam the system. What is scamming the system? Identifying a problem that you have? Opening up about something that's been bothering you for years, if not decades? Why wouldn't you want to get that fixed? Why wouldn't you want to feel better so you can be a better husband and father, better leader for your family? Because I'm sure your wife really loves you being a jerk. I'm sure your wife really loves hearing you complain all the time about that back issue that you've never brought up because you're like, no, it's not a big deal. It's only not been a big deal for like 5 years, homie. When did we become a society where we can't open up about things? Where we can't just tell people how we feel? I had a buddy of mine today. We were talking on the phone for like an hour before I headed into work. He's like, hey, man, I really appreciate you. He's like, I really love the fact that like I could just talk to you about the things that are going on in my life and like you don't judge me. I'm like, yeah, why would I judge you, bro? We're all human. He's like, I just don't have people like that I could talk to. I'd be having a different conversation with them. I'm like, dude, they're not your people. I cannot stand someone who's not vulnerable, dude. I can't stand it. I can't stand someone who like puts on this front like I am indestructible. No, you're not, nerd. Now, being vulnerable doesn't mean weak. It doesn't mean like being a victim. I'm not talking about victims. I can't stand victims either. Oh, my God. Ah. Victims, I can't handle you. You're too much. I used to be one. I couldn't even handle myself. I do not allow myself to be around victims. You're a victim, get away from me. You're like the plague. And being vulnerable, though, it's such a superpower that you possess, but you're not tapping into, and it's costing you everything. Opening up about your emotions, your feelings, what you're going through, what your desires are, what your needs are, how's that not important? How many of you are just like biting your lips about telling your partner like what kind of like freaky, kinky stuff that you want in the bedroom? You're like, man, and then what do you do? What do you do? What do you do when you're like, no one cares? You live inside your head and you go do stupid stuff. What happens when you've always wanted to say something, but you're like, man, I'm so scared to go to this event because I don't want people to think that I'm a lesser person. You went to an event to better yourself, so you're worried about people thinking you're a lesser person? What? What sense does that make? Why do you even want those people in your life? Your ability to own your life is a superpower. And that, my friends, is vulnerability. this tough guy, macho man, Randy Savage, like facade, it is just for internet likes and clicks. Do you need to push hard? Absolutely. Do you need to do hard things? Absolutely. Do you need to just go when you don't want to go? Absolutely. But do you need to get yourself taken care of? Absolutely. It's the yin and the yang. This go, 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 be hard 24/7. Dude, that is, bro, if that's the life you want, more power to you. I can tell you as an entrepreneur, my life is go, 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 go. It's very difficult. It's very hard. And I'm extremely blessed to have that difficult and hardness in my life. But I also tap into my superpower, being vulnerable. If you follow me on social media, you see it. Man, I'm struggling with this. Guys, I remember like, it was like a year ago. My best friend, he took his life. And it was probably a few months after he passed. And I was just struggling so hard. I was struggling so hard. I was having some really dark thoughts. I was in my head. Or as the kids say, I was in my feels. And I'm like, dude, I got to do something about this. So the only thing I could think of was like, I grabbed my tripod, I grabbed my phone, and I went outside, took off my shirt, and I started doing burpees on an Instagram Live. And I started to tell people, I'm like, hey, I am suffering right now. I am struggling so hard. All I could think about was my dead friend. And I was really having a hard time surviving. But I was doing something about it. No, not the burpees. What the burpees provided me to do was changing my vibration. It elevated me. And then I started to share what was going on. Hey guys, I'm struggling, but this is the only thing I could think about doing. You know what that did by opening up? It lets someone know, man, damn, if they're struggling, guess what? Maybe they could do like burpees or go on a walk or a run or go outside or maybe talk to somebody, and it's going to be okay. But if you don't do that, man, bro, it's HE double hockey sticks, bro. It's hell inside your mind. And that's a dark place to be, especially if you're victimizing yourself. But my ability to open up and to share authentically has helped so many people view their lives and their situations completely different. And I'll never change that. Because you listening to this right now, you're super important. Some of you might be a turd. We all have turd tendencies. I am not perfect, and I don't preach perfection. I preach the progressive pursuit of becoming who I'm supposed to become, who I know I can become. The progressive pursuit. Progress, progress, progress. Guys, how can you solve your problems if you don't identify them? Some of you are having so many different problems in your life. Problems not the word I want to use. Some of you guys are having so many different like emotions and feelings being brought up into your life right now, and you're unsure what to do. You're like, well, if I tell the people in the fire station, they're going to judge me. Yeah, they're going to judge you because they're probably immature. But you also don't know. And if you brought that up in the outside of you, why would you want to stay there? They don't really have your back. This whole false brotherhood crap. Yeah, brother, brother, brother. And then people's number one rebuke is, well, I've opened it up to someone before and they used it against me. They're not your people. And you have to think about this, guys. Some of you guys have poor communication skills. You opening up is not you opening up. How are you doing it? How are you doing it? Because just because you open up doesn't mean everything's be better for you. If you're a douchebag, guess what? You're just opening up being a douchebag. If you're actually not trying to help yourself and you're being a victim, I mean, guys, what did you expect? Your ability to communicate, articulate, and transform those feelings into words is your ability to be vulnerable. And if you can do that, God, you can solve so many things. You can't get help unless you identify it. People are like, man, why is Cody getting all the opportunities? Because I opened my mouth. Man, why is Cody? Because I opened my mouth. I opened my mouth. Dude, I got hearing aids in the military because I opened my mouth. I'm like, I am deaf, and I was able to take off time, and I was being a contractor for a couple of days, and we took out these like like various companies and like the hearing protection, plus like all these audiologists around the military and the civilian sector. And we basically got to put them through like an operator day. Like we did like live fire, like break contact, calling in air support, like all these crazy things. And they're like, oh my God, that's really dynamic. We're like, yeah. And the big Marine Corps has stupid foamies they're supposed to put in their ear. They're like, well, what's the chances of people putting them? Like, what's the chances of you getting mugged? And before you deploy your weapon system, you pull out your purse and you put in some foamies in your ear to protect your ears. You ain't going to do it because it's not realistic. Insert 99.9% of men and women engaged in combat. You're not like, wait a second, bad guy. Let me protect myself. It's just not real. It's not realistic. So I brought this up. I brought it up that it was an issue and that every time I've gone to the audiologist, I just keep on resetting my baseline. And every time I go to the audiogram to do my audiogram at the specialist so I could get hearing aids, they're like, oh, no, your hearing's good. I'm like, that's because you dumbed it down to be like poor. And I articulated this. I was vulnerable with what was going on in my life, not victimizing myself, not playing my hearing protection is not good. No, nerd. I didn't say anything like that. I just said it how it is. You know what happened because I said that? One of the number one audiologists on Camp Lejeune, which is the base I was working at the time, he's like, bro, call me Monday morning. Guys, within a week I had hearing aids. You can't get help unless you open your mouth. And guys, not all help stems from like just victim stuff. That's the big problem. People like they worry about being vulnerable and being a victim. That's not a victim, dude. If my foot hurts, I'm going to address it. Now, if I'm at a selection process in the military and I know that it's a 30-day thing and like you got to just suck it up to accomplish the mission. Of course, I'm going to accomplish the mission, but not a lot of you are in those scenarios. You're not in those situations. You can get help. You can open your mouth. You can tell your spouse that, hey, I had a really hard day today. How many of your lives would be better if you just opened up to your woman and said like, hey, babe, I'm having a really hard day today. I need 10 minutes to myself. Is that cool with you? She'd be like, oh my God, absolutely. You communicated with me? Absolutely. Vice, what do normal people do? What did I do? I come home pissed off. I wouldn't articulate anything to my wife, and she just thinks that I hate her or I'm just being a jerk. Being vulnerable is just exposing ourselves, how we feel, what we're going through. It's not a bad thing. And if you can find that power inside you and activate it, you'll transform so much. And I'm not just talking to the guys out there. I'm talking to you ladies out there, or, you know, if there's no ladies listening and it's just guys, tell your spouse, tell your significant other, tell the woman you like, the woman you love. Create that safe space where they feel open enough and safe enough to expose what's going on. We can solve so many problems if we just communicated. So many problems we just communicated. Now, I'm not talking about world problems. Like, guys, let's be real. That's not realistic. This reality clearly loves conflict because conflict creates compensation. And there's a lot of people just cashing checks at your expense. But in the reality that you live in your household, in your life, in your team, in your community, in your environment, in your business, why wouldn't you open up? Especially if you're a leader. Could you imagine? I mean, I remember all these like silly like safety stand downs. We're talking about like suicide awareness. And you have like this idiot's like, hey, if any of you guys are like, I don't know, like feeling like pussies and like having a hard time, you know, make sure you go see the doc so you don't kill yourself. They just say dumb shit like that, especially in the infantry. Or you have like that impenetrable guy that's like, does anyone have any issues they need to address? And looking around at everybody in a room full of like alpha males, no one's going to raise their hand because you just set the stage like that. Could you imagine if leaders were like, hey guys, listen, we're having this safety stand down about suicide awareness, and you know, I'm not going to call you guys up. I just let you know, like 3 years ago, I was in a really dark place, and this is what I did. This is how I dealt with it. This is how I handled it, and this is what I'm doing to push forward. Could you imagine how many of those little nuggets would be implanted into dudes' brains so they knew that they had a chance, they didn't have to suffer in silence? But someone's got to be brave enough to open their mouth. Is that you? Are you the one? Can you really change everything in your environment by you bearing the weight? Guys, vulnerability It's superpowers come with a price, a hefty price. But are you brave enough to empower it? Because it's a gift. It is a gift. It's not going to come easy. People are still going to judge you. They're still going to doubt you. But guess what? They still judge you and doubt you with your mouth shut. Might as well open your mouth and be judged and doubted by those and actually see who they actually are, so you realize who's not in your circle. And that's okay if people aren't in your circle, man. You're not meant to have a big circle. At least not me. My circle's tight. And it gets smaller and smaller and just richer and richer and deeper because I surround myself with people who are authentic, who are vulnerable, and who want to grow and become better. That's all I'm about. I don't care about your drama. I don't care about your victim mindset. Like, that shit doesn't serve anybody. You're just bitching. You're just complaining. There's a difference. What are you fucking doing about it? How can you help someone along their journey? Well, by starters, you got to help yourself first. So many of us want to put oxygen mask on everyone else but not ourselves. When the oxygen mask drops down, put it on yourself, then help the person to your left or right. Yep. They tell you for a reason, because if you're passing out, you're not helping anybody. If you're withering away, you're not helping anybody. Could you imagine if your fathers, right, like my dad, your dad's dad, your grandfather, could you imagine if they opened up about some hardships in their life? Could you imagine what that would have done for you? Vice, you just living on the generational trauma by like not opening up. You just suck it up in color. You work a job that you hate. You're getting underpaid because you're undervalued, because you value yourself little. Therefore, you allow other people to determine your value for you. Then you come home to the house that you really don't even live in, the neighborhood that actually sucks and is terrifying, to a relationship that's not even full of fulfillment and richness anymore. It's just kind of like mundane and bland. But yet you won't even open up to be like, you know what, babe? This sucks. You know what, babe? Like, I realize that I haven't been here for you like I need to be. Could you imagine what that might do to your wife or your husband if you said something like that to them? They'd be like, oh my God, I'm seen and heard. Well, let's work through it. Now that just completely shifts your perspective. It changes the game for everything, but it begins with you. So I want to leave you with this. Superpowers are an option. You possess them, but are you brave enough and courageous enough to actually empower them, to activate them? Because when you do, they come with a price. That price is heavy. It's so heavy, but it's so freeing at the same time. Dude, every time I'm going through something hard or every time I need something, I require help or assistance, I just ask. And it all has a magical way of just working out. But I remember looking back in my life when I didn't ask, when I didn't open my mouth, I suffered a lot. And people around me, the people that I was in charge of, people that I loved and respected, they suffered too because I'm powerful, just like you. I'm powerful. And if you don't see that for yourself, I want you to leave this episode knowing that you are. You're not those things. You're not the stigma of like the stupidness that you've been bred to believe. You can actually transform your life if you want to, but you are going to have to do it. The only way you're going to be able to do it is by speaking up. Get the help you need. Get the support you need. And take action because you're going to die. You're going to die one day. Just really want to suffer in silence forever? It's pointless. However, it's a choice. It's also a choice to free yourself. It's also a choice to activate your superpowers. And guys, I truly believe that everyone possesses the ability to activate the vulnerability inside them. And just watch what happens. Try it for a week. Just try it for a week. One, you're going to identify who's in your circle, who's not in your circle. But more importantly than just exposing that stuff, you're going to feel better getting it off your chest, and you're actually going to be able to receive support and to take action in your life. Guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Leave your comments down below. Rate us. I appreciate you. This is the Cody Alford Show. I'll see you next time.